Good day, everyone. Welcome back to another session of A&H. And at this juncture in time, we will be discussing feminism and popular culture. So we're gonna first start off with having this discussion of what is feminism. So it gets a lot of stuck in contemporary society, which is awfully often very confusing, or I find it very problematic, given what it is and how its basic tenant it would. So it makes a whole lot of sense. So at its core, feminism is an approach that examines the inequalities of sexes, believing it's largely that their differences are culturally and socially constructed. So there are some differences between men and women or males and females, but to the degree in which males and females are separated and deemed different, our culture, much of that is culturally and socially constructed. And there's a lot of research that reinforce this, that says, no, you know, we program our culture often, or we reinforce the cultural norm that boys are one way, girls or another, males or one way, females or another. Okay, so when we talk about sex, no, we're clearly talking about what role somebody has in reproduction, but that all of a sudden becomes extrapolated into decision around. So males should do this. If males should always ask females to out on a date, or females should always be this or that. No, more are things that are largely culturally and socially constructed. So within popular culture, we want to look at the ways in which women are dealt with, shaped, and represented. So I would also add increasingly the ways in which they act to represent and renegotiate themselves, having through feminism gain a lot more cultural power over the last 30 or 40 years. So we have a couple different major approach of feminism. So theories of popular culture. So the first is liberal feminism. So and this could be an approach, or this would be the argument, or in unequal representation in media or popular culture. So the goal would be to have an equal representation. And what do we mean by equal representation? Well, if we look at population, we know that 51% of the population is female. And so within popular culture, within media, so that should be mean that 51% representation is there. So in films, you should see at least half of those films having a strong female protagonist, or to be having a female lead, or to do something. In the news, you should have half of your anchors, or 51% of your anchors should be female. So politicians, we look when we look at who's in Congress, how many presidents we've had. No, there should be equal representation. No, it should not just be what it has been historically overwhelmingly male, right? Now we have radical feminism, and within radical feminism, this is where certainly there gets to be some challenges, or this is where a lot of people end up being really concerned, or we get, we hear that the term radical, and all of a sudden think, well, radical feminism sees that culture is purposely structured to present negative images of females to maintain the the patriarchy. We see high culture is the equivalent of masculine, and pop culture is the equivalent of female, is the equivalent of feminine. And within this, that there is this idea of, and we can think about it. When we look at high culture, and again, how many of them are overwhelmingly male? No, the suppose a great artist and a great other actor, these are considered male, or high culture is seen as something that is dignified, true. No, Yeah, you know, your male behavior, right? A good example, go to museum. The proper behavior is to be quiet and respectful. You know, you are supposed to talk, and talking is something that we often in our culture, no, privilege females. No, we say, you know, women they're so chatty. So we see this kind of dynamics, or within radical feminism, they say that. You know, we have a culture that has purposely, you know, it was purposely structured to disempower females, and that needs to be renegotiated or reoriented. Then we have socialist feminism, and this understand that media construction is situated within other social dynamics such as class and race. And I think this is an interesting one because in social feminism, you know, they recognize some of the things we see in liberal and radical feminism, but they are also aware of their these other aspects to be, you know, to take into consideration class and race or major elements within all of within anything or within popular culture. And so we have feminism, socialist feminism, no, really taking that into account and really trying to speak to those pieces as well as, and of course, no, you know, it's socialist items and feminism that's why it does speak up to class. And of course, in the last 100 years, we'll also be understanding that, or in the last 100 years, the last you know, 30 years, 40 years, also understanding that race is also interconnected with that. All right, so we have some hypotheses or some ways of understanding what's going on with feminism or feminist approaches to thinking about popular culture, and one is the reflection hypothesis. And this hypothesis essentially says media per, perpet, perpetuates the dominant social values in our culture, no, often though through symbolic representation of how we want to see ourselves, no, they do this in part to attract audiences through lowest common denominator, no, shared values in amusement. And so within that, now within that reflection hypothesis, the argument would be if we had more, or you know, a larger representation of females in popular culture, no, throughout popular culture, artists, writers, creators, protagonists, no, this would actually, or this should be improve or help us recognize, you know, what we want to see in ourselves, or improve understanding and appreciation of females more than what it have in the past. We also see content analysis, and this actually extrapolating the elements of a piece of media to measure how much of something is represented. So here we might look at, you know, just how many women are anchor people on all the news station in the country, and how many films in the last year had strong female leads, you know, had females who were not just, you know, were no represented in the sexiest fashion, were not required to show themselves, or you know, to reveal their bodies while their uh, make counterparts in the film, no, didn't have to write, no. So we're really looking at a kind of finding out exactly how much is there to recognize those differences. But there is that question of does presence of a trend contribute of truth, and this is of course causation versus correlation. And we see that with violence, right? So if we see there's more violence on TV, that this actually represents something, or is that cause, you know, it is causing effect, there's a correlation, are the people just more violent, and so therefore we want to see more violence on TV. Similarly with females, you know, thus more representation of females actually constitute a truth. Now, does it constitute something has changed in does it have any real world effect? And then we have interpretative analysis. And here's, what goes on is exploring the underlying meanings and ideas, no, not overly present within a piece of popular culture, making sense of its subtext that is using things like semiology and structuralism to really take part apart what's going on in a particular film, or a particular piece of popular culture, a film, a comic, or what you have you. There's is so much an interpretative analysis. Your down with one piece, and you're in one piece. When I say one piece, that could be the entire run of a TV show, right? That technically one piece, or it could be one episode, and you're really taking apart, how the ideas within that piece of a popular culture are being explored. So reflection, hypothesis, content analysis, interpretative analysis, we're talking about all of this with relation to feminism, but these are things you could do with other types of identity and concepts in popular culture, or everywhere, or anywhere for that matter. But what we do see, or what's been argued with feminism, that's important to recognize, is what we call the symbolic annihilation.
Okay, nag-track ako.
Symbolic annihilation of women. This is the patriarchy, the patriarchal culture attempts to limit and lessen the power, abilities, and the agencies of women through limited representation, that is by limiting the roles that they can be, by limiting, where they show up in popular culture. There's the symbolic annihilation of women. And so, women don't see themselves in roles of power, don't see themselves out there and culture in significant ways, and there is a questions of does not then limit the hopes as aspirations are potential for females, and that just reinforce the patriarchal structure. Actually, there is really interesting research around this and views of this. If you ever have a chance, I'd recommend the book Big Girls Don't Cry. And I can remember the author of it right now, but the book really does not look at this how this happened. Or the ways in which females were attached in 2008 presidential election. When you have both Hillary Clinton and Sarah Palin, regardless of what you think of their politics, were brutally attached for things beyond what the male contenders were attached for things that trivialize them as women. And so I think this idea of symbolic annihilation is very important that still lingers in our culture today. And finally, we talked about this earlier in the semester when we talk about gender, sex, and sexuality, but it's worth mentioning again this idea of the gaze and popular culture by Laura Mulvey. And the idea, and again, we still see it, although I would say it's much more dynamic nowadays. And that's not to say it's gone away, but we still see more little multiple viewing of it, and I guess we have more than one gaze, but this was, in many cultural products, men are meant to be the lookers, viewers, and gazers, while female are to be the object of the gaze. This too is also said to have shaped how we act and conceive ourselves, that what we see throughout popular culture is this exhibition of women to be looked at, to be the object and the man, to be the agent, right? So them, if you ever watching an older film, you'll see the camera will look it. This you see the camera will look it will hear in the man, and the man is looking, and then the camera will out to the woman and give you along. Follows the trail up and down the body of the woman to show you she's meant to be looked at. And this is certainly true. When we look at the culture in the ways in which men and women present themselves out in the culture, out in the society, if that a women are encouraged to, and even in a certain job required to dress up to a certain degree to present themselves as a viewable. This entails makeup, this entails, wearing things like heels and skirt, and a variety of, accoutrements that are to make them present to be seen, whereas men, there's often a lot wear lewy, there's often a lot less attention to their attire. I'm gonna just I'm gonna just do two example here, and I think are worth, kind of thinking about within this. The first is cookbook. This might be less so nowadays. In the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, because we'd have the rise of the foodie movement, which has a mixtures of people included. But we can, if you look historically, and could probably still see, and if you go into the food section of the bookstore and look at the cookbook course, how many of them are female and how many of them are male? And if they are male, are they designated a chef, though they have chef attire, or they domestically placed? If we look if we look there, we all see of these females, and they are largely in the kitchen, right? So this, looking at this is using a feminist analysis. So here are the examples of feminism.
That wrap ups with our topic for today. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching.